I'm Rebecca Mitchell, 32 years old, and was finalizing details for my wedding to Jason when my phone buzzed with a family group text. My stomach dropped reading those words from my parents. "We think it's best you step away for now." They were cutting me off because I refused the extravagant wedding they demanded. I sat frozen, watching responses roll in until my Aunt Vivian's message appeared. "If you're not attending the wedding of your only daughter, then I'll be the one to walk her down the aisle." Before I continue this story, where are you watching from? Ever experienced family wedding drama? Hit subscribe and join me through this emotional roller coaster. Growing up in the Mitchell household meant living under constant scrutiny. My parents, Eleanor and Thomas, weren't cruel, they were calculating. Everything from our wardrobes to our extracurricular activities was carefully selected to project the perfect image to their social circle. Our colonial-style home in Boston's affluent Beacon Hill neighborhood was spotless, our family photos perfectly staged, our achievements publicly celebrated. But behind closed doors, nothing was ever good enough. My brother Andrew thrived under this pressure. He excelled at everything: academics, sports, social charm, becoming the golden child who could do no wrong. I, on the other hand, was the disappointment. Not because I failed at anything particular, but because I never quite fit the mold they'd designed. I was a dreamer, creative, and more interested in capturing moments than manufacturing them. The first camera I ever held was a beat-up Polaroid my Aunt Vivian gave me for my 10th birthday. My mother rolled her eyes when I unwrapped it, saying, "Really, Viv, another impractical gift." But that camera opened a whole new world for me. I started seeing everything differently, finding beauty in imperfections, appreciating genuine emotions rather than posed smiles. Aunt Vivian was my mother's younger sister, and her complete opposite. Where Mom was rigid, Vivian was flexible. Where Mom calculated, Vivian created. Their childhood photos showed two sisters who once seemed close, but somewhere along the way they diverged dramatically. Mom chose the traditional path: college marriage to a successful businessman, motherhood in the right neighborhood with the right connections. Vivian became a travel writer, married a musician, and raised my cousin Megan in a cozy, cluttered apartment filled with treasures from around the world. Visiting Aunt Vivian was like exhaling after holding my breath all week at home. In her apartment, there were no expectations to maintain, no appearances to keep up. She asked questions about what I thought rather than telling me what to think. When I showed her my photographs, she didn't ask how they would contribute to my college applications. She asked what stories I was trying to tell. "You have an eye for authenticity, Rebecca," she told me when I was 16, reviewing a portfolio I'd created. "That's rare, especially considering." She didn't finish the sentence, but we both knew what went unsaid. After high school, I obediently attended the prestigious university my parents selected, majoring in business while minoring in photography. It was the compromise I made to keep the peace. After graduation, I shocked everyone by declining the corporate job offers my father had arranged. Instead, I took a position assisting a well-known wedding photographer. "It's just a phase," my mother assured her friends at their monthly luncheon. "She'll get it out of her system." 6 years later, I had built my own successful wedding photography business. My style became known for capturing authentic moments rather than rigidly posed scenes. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd found success photographing precisely the kind of traditional milestone my parents valued, but doing it my way. I met Jason Carter at a gallery showing my personal photography series. He wasn't part of my parents' social circle. He was a landscape architect who designed sustainable gardens and public spaces. He walked straight to a black and white photograph I'd taken of an elderly couple dancing in their kitchen, completely lost in each other's eyes, despite the mess of dishes around them. "This is love," he said, not realizing I was standing right behind him. Not the fancy wedding day version, but the everyday kind that survives decades. When I introduced myself as the photographer, his genuine interest in my perspective, rather than my pedigree, was refreshing. Our first date lasted 6 hours as we walked through Boston Common, discussing everything from environmental design to family dynamics. By our third date, I knew he was different from anyone I'd met before. With Jason, I never felt the need to perform or impress. He saw me the real me, and that was enough. After a year of dating, he proposed during a weekend trip to a coastal town where we'd rented a small cottage. No elaborate setup, no audience, just the two of us on the porch, watching the sunset. It was perfect. My parents' reaction to our engagement was predictably measured. Mother arranged an intimate engagement dinner for 30 of their closest friends. Father shook Jason's hand firmly while asking pointed questions about his 5-year career plan. They smiled for photos while whispering critiques about the modest emerald engagement ring Jason had selected, knowing my preference for unique, meaningful jewelry over traditional diamonds. "We're just so thrilled," my mother repeated to everyone, her smile never reaching her eyes. "Of course, we'll help with everything. The Mitchell family always hosts the most memorable weddings." That was the beginning of the problem. In my parents' minds, my wedding wasn't about Jason and me creating a meaningful commitment ceremony. It was another performance, another opportunity to showcase the Mitchell family's status and taste. They began making plans immediately, calling venues, contacting caterers, creating guest lists, all without consulting us. When Jason and I announced we wanted a small, intimate ceremony with around 50 guests, my mother nearly choked on her wine. "But darling," she said, recovering quickly, "we've already spoken to the coordinator at the Danford Hotel. They can accommodate the 300 guests we're considering." 300, I echoed. "Mom, I don't even know 300 people." "It's not about who you know," she explained, as if talking to a child. "It's about who needs to be there. Your father has business associates, we have social obligations. This isn't just your wedding, Rebecca. It's a Mitchell family event." And that's when I realized the fundamental disconnect that would eventually lead to that devastating group message. To my parents, this wedding was never mine to begin with. The battles began over brunch the following Sunday. My mother arrived with 3 enormous binders, color-coded and organized with military precision. "I've narrowed it down to 3 acceptable venues," she declared, sliding the first binder toward me. "The Danford is still my top recommendation, but the Westfield Country Club and Bristol Gardens would be suitable alternatives." I flipped through pages of ballrooms that could accommodate hundreds of guests, elaborate stage setups for bands and price packages that made my stomach clench. Jason squeezed my hand under the table as my mother continued outlining her vision. "We'll need to finalize the venue by next week to secure the June date. I've already spoken with Reverend Phillips about officiating. The guest list is at 286 now, but your father thinks we should extend invitations to the Harringtons and the Whitfields, even though we know they likely can't attend due to their summer homes in Europe." "Mom," I interrupted, gathering my courage. "Jason and I have been talking, and we have a different vision for our wedding." Her smile froze. "Different how?" "We want something smaller, more personal. Maybe 50 people outdoors focusing on sustainable choices. We were thinking about the public garden where we volunteer, or even a public garden." My mother's voice rose an octave. "Rebecca, be serious. What would people think?" "That's exactly it, Mom. We don't care what people think. We care about creating a day that represents our relationship and values." The next few months became a tug of war. For every decision Jason and I made, my parents countered with thinly veiled disapproval or outright resistance. When we selected an eco-friendly venue, a restored barn on a small organic farm outside the city, my father coincidentally sent photos of my cousin's wedding at the Bristol Gardens, mentioning repeatedly how everyone still talked about its elegance years later. When we chose a local farm-to-table catering company, my mother arranged a surprise tasting with the exclusive caterer used by all her friends. When we decided against formal calligraphy invitations in favor of handmade recycled paper with wildflower seeds embedded that guests could plant, she actually cried. "How will the Prestons react when they receive some amateur craft project instead of a proper invitation?" she lamented. "If they care more about the invitation than celebrating our marriage, maybe they shouldn't come," I suggested. The real breaking point came during what should have been a simple dinner at my parents' home 3 months before the wedding. Jason and I arrived to find not just my parents, but also my brother, Andrew, and his wife, Sarah, waiting. Mother had prepared my favorite meal from childhood, a transparent attempt at manipulation that set my teeth on edge before we'd even sat down. "We wanted to discuss the wedding as a family," my father announced once we were seated. "There are some concerns we need to address." Those concerns turned out to be a meticulously prepared presentation about why our wedding plans were inadequate. Father outlined the social implications Mother fretted about, missed networking opportunities. Andrew chimed in about family traditions being ignored, and Sarah smiled tightly while commenting on what people would say about such an unconventional choice. "The Mitchell name means something in this community," my father concluded. "This wedding reflects on all of us, not just you two." I looked at Jason, whose patience was clearly wearing thin despite his diplomatic silence. "Actually," I said finally, "it reflects on me and Jason. It's our wedding, our commitment, our day." We're paying for it, my father countered. That gives us some say in how it unfolds. The room temperature seemed to drop. Jason and I had never formally agreed to let my parents pay, though they'd assumed control from the beginning. We'd been trying to navigate this diplomatically, but that statement clarified everything. If your financial contribution means we have to sacrifice what this day means to us, Jason said quietly, then we respectfully decline your assistance. We'll pay for the wedding ourselves. My mother gasped. My father's face reddened dangerously. Andrew scoffed. Don't be ridiculous, my father said. On a photographer's salary and what you make designing parks. We'll manage, I said, standing up. Our wedding will be smaller and simpler than what you envision, but it will be authentic. And that matters more to us than impressing your business associates. The argument that followed was ugly. Years of tension erupted as my parents accused me of ingratitude and rebellion, while I finally voiced decades of resentment about conditional love and impossible standards. Jason tried to mediate until Andrew suggested he was manipulating me against my family, which triggered another heated exchange. If you insist on this embarrassment of a ceremony, my father finally declared, then perhaps it's better if we reconsider our involvement entirely. Maybe it is, I replied, shaking despite my resolve. Jason and I left shortly after the dinner uneaten, the relationship fractured. In the car, we held hands in silence, both processing the magnitude of what had just happened. I was trembling, torn between the lifetime habit of appeasing my parents and the deep certainty that we needed to stand firm. We can postpone, Jason offered. Or elope. Whatever you need. No, I said. I want our wedding. Our real wedding with people who support us. If they can't be happy for us without controlling everything, then... I couldn't finish the sentence, but I didn't need to. The next morning, my phone chimed with a group message that would change everything. The message arrived at 9:17 a.m. I was at my desk reviewing client photos when my phone lit up with a notification from the family group chat, a digital space usually reserved for holiday coordination and occasional sharing of family news. My coffee grew cold as I read the message from my father. After considerable reflection, Eleanor and I believe it's best if we step away from Rebecca and Jason's wedding planning process. Their vision differs significantly from the Mitchell family traditions we value, and we find ourselves unable to support choices that contradict what we believe is appropriate. We will not be contributing financially to an event we cannot endorse. We hope they reconsider their approach, but until then, we think it's best we step away for now. I stared at the screen, watching the message reactions roll in. 3 dots appeared as family members began typing responses. My cousin from my father's side sent a diplomatic, sending love to everyone during this difficult time. My brother Andrew quickly added, I stand with Mom and Dad on this. Family traditions matter. His wife Sarah contributed a simple thumbs-up emoji. My mother's college friend, who somehow was in our family group, wrote completely understandable Eleanor. You've always maintained such wonderful standards. The betrayal burned like acid in my stomach. This wasn't a private communication, it was a public declaration, designed to embarrass me, to rally the family against us, to force us back in line through social pressure. I couldn't type, couldn't think, couldn't breathe. Then Aunt Vivian's response appeared. If you're not attending the wedding of your only daughter, then I'll be the one to walk her down the aisle. Rebecca and Jason, your wedding plans sound beautiful and meaningful. I'm honored to be included in your vision, whatever you decide. Thomas and Eleanor, I'm profoundly disappointed in your attempt to manipulate this situation. This behavior is exactly why we've grown apart over the years. The group chat exploded. Mother responded with a paragraph about how Vivian had always undermined her parenting. Father accused Vivian of encouraging my rebellious tendencies. Various relatives took sides, some expressing shock at my parents' decision, others defending tradition. Through it all, Jason's name kept appearing in notifications as he watched the disaster unfold, but wisely stayed silent. After 20 minutes of this public family meltdown, I turned off my phone, entirely pushed away from my desk, and drove to Jason's office. He met me in the parking lot, having seen enough of the messages to understand. I collapsed into his arms, sobbing with a mixture of hurt, rage, and strange relief. I never thought they'd actually do this, I managed between tears. Cut me off completely, over centerpieces and venue choices. Jason held me tightly. It's not about centerpieces, it's about control. We spent that evening at his apartment, phones turned off, processing what had happened. I cycled through emotions, devastation that my parents would publicly disown me over wedding details, rage at their manipulation tactics, heartbreak at the family members who sided against us, and unexpected gratitude for Aunt Vivian's fierce defense. "What do we do now?" I asked, as we sat on his balcony sharing a bottle of wine. "Scale everything back, postpone. We do whatever feels right to you," Jason said. "This is our wedding. Not theirs. Not the extended family's. Ours." I called Aunt Vivian the next morning. Her voice was warm and unwavering. "I meant what I said, Rebecca. If Thomas won't walk you down the aisle, I would be honored to do it. Or Megan. Or you could walk alone. Whatever feels authentic." "They're my parents," I whispered, the pain still fresh. "How do they just step away?" "Oh, sweetheart. This isn't about you. It's about them. Their image, their control, their inability to see you as a separate person with your own beautiful life. I've watched them do this your whole life, conditional love based on compliance. What if they never speak to me again?" "They will," she assured me, "once they realize their tactics aren't working. But the question is, what boundaries will you set when they do?" After our conversation, I logged back into my email to find messages from various family members. Some expressed sympathy, others disappointment in my disrespect toward my parents. Most painful was a lengthy email from my brother Andrew filled with phrases like selfish choices and embarrassing the family name. The person who had shared a childhood with me, who knew our parents' impossible standards firsthand, had fully embraced their perspective and abandoned me. The final line of his email cut deepest. "If you cared about this family at all, you'd stop this nonsense and apologize." As painful as this betrayal was, it crystallized something important. This wasn't just about a wedding anymore. It was about whether I would live my life on my terms or theirs. And for the first time, despite the heartbreak, I was choosing mine. I naively believed the conflict would remain contained within our family circle. That illusion shattered exactly 9 days after the group message when I encountered Mrs. Blanchard, my mother's garden club president, at the local farmers market. Her expression upon seeing me shifted from recognition to pity so quickly it gave me emotional whiplash. "Rebecca, dear," she said, clutching my arm, "I just want you to know that everyone supports your parents during this difficult time. The way you've rejected their guidance. Well, it's commendable they're handling it with such grace." I stood frozen between the heirloom tomatoes and organic lettuce shopping basket, dangling from my suddenly numb fingers. "I'm sorry." Oh, she backtracked, realizing perhaps I wasn't aware of what had been said. "Well, your mother mentioned the wedding situation at our meeting. Such a shame when children make choices that reflect poorly on their upbringing, but I shouldn't get involved." Yet she clearly was involved, along with everyone else in my parents' social circle. As I continued my errands that day, I noticed similar reactions, averted gazes from family, friends, whispered conversations that stopped when I approached the occasional sympathetic smile from someone who likely had heard my parents' carefully crafted version of events. By evening, I'd pieced together the narrative they'd constructed. Their ungrateful daughter had abandoned family traditions to have an alternative wedding with her boyfriend's questionable influence, rejecting their generous offers of help and breaking their hearts in the process. "They're rewriting history," I told Jason that night, pacing his living room, "making themselves the victims when they're the ones who cut me off." "Are you surprised?" he asked gently. I wasn't, not really. Image management had always been my parents' specialty, but knowing their playbook didn't make it hurt any less. The situation escalated dramatically the following weekend at my cousin's baby shower, a family event I attended with trepidation but couldn't ethically skip. I arrived early to help set up, avoiding the inevitable confrontation with my mother, who would undoubtedly arrive precisely on time. What I didn't anticipate was Andrew and Sarah showing up during setup. The three of us froze in my aunt's kitchen, surrounded by half-inflated pastel balloons and gift bags. Rebecca Andrew acknowledged stiffly. I nodded, continuing to arrange cupcakes on a tiered stand. "This family situation is getting out of hand," he said. "You need to apologize to Mom and Dad." I set down the dessert tray carefully. Apologize? For what exactly? Having my own wedding vision. For being selfish, Sarah interjected. For putting your trendy farm wedding above family harmony. Trendy, I repeated, anger rising. Our wedding reflects who we are and what we value. And last I checked, family harmony doesn't mean absolute obedience. Andrew stepped closer, lowering his voice. You've always done this, created drama to be the center of attention. First your artistic phase, then rejecting Dad's job connections to take pictures, now this wedding spectacle. Spectacle. We're having 50 guests in a garden. They wanted a 300-person extravaganza. Because that's what Mitchells do, he hissed. We maintain standards. We respect traditions. We don't embarrass the family with hippie ceremonies and homemade invitations. The argument escalated until my cousin's wife intervened, her pregnant belly physically separating us as she reminded everyone about stress being bad for the baby. We retreated to opposite sides of the house, the tension palpable. When my mother arrived 30 minutes later, she swept in like visiting royalty, accepting condolences for my behavior, as though I'd committed a crime rather than planned a wedding. She acknowledged my presence with a cool nod before deliberately turning her back. The breaking point came during gift opening. My cousin unwrapped my carefully selected organic cotton baby clothes and handmade mobile, thanking me warmly. My mother immediately followed by presenting her gift, an extravagant designer baby wardrobe that made my thoughtful selection look inadequate by comparison. The triumphant glance she shot me wasn't subtle. "That's exactly what I'd expect from you, Eleanor," Aunt Vivian commented, arriving fashionably late. "Always trying to overshadow everyone." The room temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees. "Some of us simply have better taste, Vivian," my mother replied icily. "And some of us have better values," Vivian countered, settling beside me on the sofa and squeezing my hand. "How's the wedding planning going, Rebecca? Jason mentioned you found the perfect, sustainable floral designer." What followed was the most uncomfortable social event I'd ever experienced, with Aunt Vivian deliberately engaging me in wedding conversations loud enough for everyone to hear, while my mother grew increasingly rigid with barely contained fury. The shower ended with two distinct family factions and my pregnant cousin in tears. The fallout continued beyond family gatherings. The following week, I received an alarming call from a bride whose wedding I was scheduled to photograph. "I'm so sorry," she began awkwardly, "but we're going with a different photographer. We heard there was some instability in your personal life that might affect your work." I sat stunned as she elaborated someone had suggested I might be unreliable due to family issues. It didn't take detective work to trace this back to my parents' social network, which included the bride's future mother-in-law. 2 more cancellations followed, jeopardizing not just my emotional well-being but my livelihood. I was being professionally sabotaged over a personal family dispute. Jason's family, meanwhile, had reached out with unexpected warmth. His parents, whom I had met several times and liked immediately for their unpretentious kindness, called to express their support. "We don't understand this situation," his mother said frankly, "but we want you to know that we're thrilled to welcome you to our family however you and Jason choose to celebrate." Their unconditional acceptance highlighted exactly what was missing from my own family. The contrast was both healing and heartbreaking. By the 6-week mark after the initial group message, the situation had affected every aspect of my life. My business was suffering, family gatherings were battlegrounds, and even casual social interactions were landmines of potential gossip and judgment. What had begun as a disagreement over wedding details had metastasized into a comprehensive attack on my life, choices, relationship, and character. I was exhausted, demoralized, and beginning to question whether any wedding was worth this level of discord. And just when I thought things couldn't possibly escalate further, they did in ways I never could have anticipated. The plain brown box arrived on a Wednesday afternoon, delivered to my apartment without warning. No note, no explanation, just my childhood address as the return location. Inside, carefully wrapped in tissue paper, my high school yearbooks, my childhood stuffed rabbit with the worn ear, the handmade Mother's Day cards I'd created in elementary school, the shadow box of pressed flowers from my 16th birthday celebration. My parents were returning my childhood to me piece by piece. The message was clear: if I rejected their vision for my future, they were symbolically erasing my past. The calculated cruelty of it took my breath away. I sat on my apartment floor, surrounded by the artifacts of a childhood that now seemed like a beautiful lie. Every school award, every family vacation, memento, every holiday decoration I'd made, all carefully preserved by the same people who were now wielding these treasures as weapons. I called Jason, but my voice failed when he answered. All I managed was a choked sob before hanging up. He arrived 20 minutes later with takeout food I couldn't eat and gentle words I barely heard. The emotional dam had finally broken, and I cried until my body ached, until my eyes swelled, until there was nothing left but hollow exhaustion. They're erasing me, I whispered when I could finally speak. Like I never existed. No, Jason said firmly. They're trying to erase the you that exists now, the strong, independent woman who doesn't bend to their control. They want the compliant daughter back. The next morning, functioning on autopilot, I dragged myself to a client meeting for an upcoming wedding. I'd barely slept, my eyes were still puffy, and my usual professional enthusiasm felt like a distant memory. Halfway through discussing photo locations, the bride, a sweet, intuitive woman planning a modest ceremony, reached across the table and touched my hand. Rebecca, are you okay? You seem not yourself. The simple kindness broke me again. I apologized profusely, made a flimsy excuse about allergies, and somehow stumbled through the remainder of the meeting. But as I reached my car afterward, the panic attack hit with stunning force. My chest constricted, my vision tunneled, and I couldn't catch my breath. Convinced I was dying, I fumbled for my phone and called the only person I could think of, my best friend, Alyssa. She found me still in the parking lot, hyperventilating in the driver's seat. With calm efficiency, she talked me through breathing exercises, moved me to the passenger side, and drove me to her apartment. There on her comfortable sofa with her cat purring against my leg, I told her everything, the box of childhood mementos, the professional sabotage, the family division, all of it. I'm thinking maybe we should just postpone the wedding, I admitted. Or elope. Something private without all this drama. Is that what you want? She asked. Or is that you surrendering? The question hung in the air between us. Before I could answer, there was a knock at Alyssa's door. Jason stood there, worry etched across his face. Behind him, surprisingly, was my Aunt Vivian. Alyssa called us, Jason explained, kneeling before me. She was concerned. Aunt Vivian settled beside me, her perfume always the same sandalwood scent since my childhood, immediately comforting. I heard about the box, she said simply. That was Eleanor's idea. She did the same thing to me when I got engaged to your Uncle Robert instead of the banker she'd selected. She sent back your childhood things too, I asked. No, darling. She burned them in the backyard and sent me the photographs. Vivian's matter-of-fact tone somehow made this revelation more shocking. Your mother has always wielded emotion like a weapon. It's how she was raised, and it's how she's raised her children. I don't understand how they can just discard me, I said, the hurt still raw. Over a wedding? It's never been about the wedding, Vivian replied. It's about control. They're playing emotional chicken, they believe. If they make you suffer enough, you'll swerve first. And if I don't, then you break the pattern. And that terrifies them. We talked for hours, the four of us. Aunt Vivian revealed family history I'd never known. Patterns of emotional manipulation spanning generations. The rivalry between her and my mother, rooted in their own parents' toxic favoritism the way image and social standing had, always trumped authentic connection in the Mitchell family tree. As evening fell, I received a text from my brother. We need to talk. I'm coming by your place tomorrow at 10. I showed the group. Jason immediately tensed. I should be there. No, I decided. I need to handle this myself. The next morning, I waited in my apartment, anxiety churning. Andrew arrived precisely at 10, looking uncomfortable in my modest living space. The box was excessive, he began without preamble. I told them that. But you support everything else they've done, I challenged. He sighed, pacing my small living room. You don't understand the position you've put everyone in. Mom's a wreck. Dad's reputation is suffering. People are talking. And that's my fault. For wanting my own wedding. For being selfish, he snapped. For not considering how your choices affect the family, Rebecca, just apologize. Have the wedding at Bristol Gardens. Invite their friends. Make peace. I stared at my brother, the golden child, the perfect son, the keeper of the Mitchell flame. Did they send you to convince me? His hesitation told me everything. They did, didn't they? I pressed. Did they promise something in return? Dad's connections for your new department. Mom's influence with the hospital board. Andrew's face flushed. It's not like that. Then what's it like? They offered to pay off the remainder of my medical school loans, he admitted finally. If I could convince you to reconsider. The betrayal stung afresh. So my wedding is worth, what, $100,000 to them? It's about family unity, he insisted, but his eyes wouldn't meet mine. Get out, I whispered. Just get out. After he left, I made 3 discoveries in rapid succession that pushed me to my breaking point. First, a wedding vendor called to confirm the cancellation of our deposit, a cancellation I hadn't authorized. A quick series of calls revealed my parents had contacted every vendor we'd booked, claiming to represent me and Jason. Second, I discovered through a client that my parents had approached a competing wedding photographer, suggesting they reach out to my booked clients with competitive offers given my uncertain situation. The third blow came that evening. Jason called, his voice tight with controlled anger. My parents just received an email from your father. He's suggesting they intervene in our wedding plans for the sake of both families' reputations. They involved your parents now, I whispered, horrified, with a not-so-subtle reference to his connections possibly being beneficial to my dad's construction business. That was it, the final line crossed. They weren't just attacking me now, but Jason and his family too. The pressure in my chest returned, the panic rising, but this time with something new underneath it, resolve. I ended up on Alyssa's doorstep again, this time determined rather than broken. I need help, I told her simply. She called Jason and ordered pizza. Over dinner, I explained my realization. This isn't going to stop. Not with the wedding, not after. This is the pattern for the rest of my life unless I break it now. What do you want to do? Jason asked. First, secure our wedding plans from further sabotage. Then, I took a deep breath. I think I need professional help to navigate this. A therapist who specializes in family trauma. Alyssa immediately pulled out her phone. My cousin saw someone amazing after her divorce. Let me get her number. The decision to seek therapy was perhaps the most significant turning point. Not because it solved the immediate crisis, but because it represented my commitment to healing rather than merely surviving. This wasn't just about a wedding anymore, it was about reclaiming my life from patterns that had controlled me since childhood. That night, as Jason and I lay in bed discussing our next steps, my phone pinged with an unexpected message from Aunt Vivian. I'm proud of you for standing your ground. When you're ready, I'd like to offer my garden for your ceremony. It's not fancy, but it's filled with love and acceptance. No strings attached. Attached was a photo of her backyard garden, wild, beautiful, authentic. Exactly like the woman herself. For the first time in weeks, I cried, not from pain, but from gratitude. The path forward wasn't clear yet, but I was no longer walking it alone. Dr. Larson's office became my sanctuary over the following weeks. Twice weekly, I sank into her comfortable gray couch and slowly untangled the complex web of family dynamics that had shaped me. She neither vilified my parents nor excused their behavior, instead helping me understand the generational patterns at play. Your parents are operating from their own unhealed wounds, she explained during one particularly insightful session. This doesn't justify their actions, but it might help you respond rather than react. With her guidance, I drafted a carefully worded email to my parents, not an apology for my wedding choices, but a clear boundary statement. I explained that while I loved them and wanted them in my life, I would no longer accept conditional love or manipulation. I outlined specifically which behaviors needed to stop, expressed hope for eventual reconciliation, but made clear that our relationship moving forward would be different. You're not asking permission, Dr. Larson reminded me as I agonized over each word. You're stating your boundaries. The response came 3 days later, a lengthy defensive email that managed to include both guilt-inducing statements about my abandonment of family values and subtle offers of reconciliation if I would reconsider certain decisions. It was exactly as Dr. Larson had predicted. They weren't ready to change the dynamic. This is where most people give in, she noted. The pull of family patterns is powerful, but you have a choice. I chose to maintain my boundaries, responding only with a brief acknowledgement and reiteration of my position. The silence that followed was both painful and peaceful. During this period of family estrangement, I met my cousin Megan for coffee. As Aunt Vivian's daughter, she'd grown up adjacent to but separate from the Mitchell family drama. There's something you should know, she said once we'd settled at an outdoor table. This pattern with your parents, it's deeper than you realize. Your mom did the same thing to my mom when she got engaged to Dad. The difference was, your grandparents took your mom's side and basically cut Aunt Vivian off financially. I knew they had issues around that time, but not the details, I admitted. It's why Mom is so fiercely in your corner now. She sees history repeating itself. Megan stirred her coffee thoughtfully. There's more. Your mom was engaged before she met your dad. To someone her parents didn't approve of. She gave him up to please them, married your father, instead their choice, not hers. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. My perfectly controlled mother had once defied her parents for love, then surrendered. Had she spent the last 30 years compensating for that perceived failure? Was her grip on me so tight because she'd lost her own chance at authentic choice? This new understanding didn't excuse her behavior, but contextualizing it helped me process my anger. I was breaking not just my own chains, but potentially a multi-generational pattern of control and compliance. Meanwhile, our wedding plans had undergone a dramatic transformation. After accepting Aunt Vivian's offer of her garden, we'd scaled back even further than our original vision, focusing on creating an intimate ceremony with only our closest supporters. Unexpectedly, this limitation became a gift. Without the pressure to accommodate everyone, we could design a celebration that truly reflected us. Jason and I spent evenings in his apartment, sketching garden layouts, selecting meaningful music, and writing personal vows. We decided against a formal wedding party, traditional, processional, or many of the conventional elements that felt performative rather than authentic. My business slowly stabilized as well. Though I'd lost several clients due to my parents' interference, the situation had inadvertently connected me with couples who valued authenticity over social convention. A bride who'd heard about my situation through mutual acquaintances actually sought me out specifically. "If you can stay true to your vision, despite that level of pressure," she told me then, "you're exactly the kind of photographer we want capturing our day." Word spread, and soon I was booking clients who specifically wanted my documentary-style approach rather than the formal posed portraiture favored in my parents' social circle. For the first time, I felt like my business was truly mine, not a compromise to appease my family. Jason's unwavering support throughout this period transformed our relationship. The pressure had either broken or strengthened us, and we'd emerged more committed than ever. Our relationship discussions deepened beyond wedding plans to how we'd handle family dynamics, holidays, and eventually children. We were building our own family culture, intentionally determined to break harmful patterns. 7 weeks after the initial group message, I received an unexpected text from a former client whose wedding I'd photographed the previous year. "I heard through the grapevine about your wedding situation. Our florist is doing a styled shoot and needs a photographer. Paid gig, plus she mentioned she'd love to donate arrangements for your actual day. Interested?" This gesture opened a floodgate of support I never anticipated. As word spread about our situation, the wedding industry community, which I'd been part of for years, rallied around us. A cake designer offered a small wedding cake as a portfolio expansion opportunity. A musician friend volunteered to play the ceremony. A former bride insisted on doing my makeup as a wedding gift. Aunt Vivian's garden transformation became a community project, with friends gathering on weekends to plant additional flowers, string fairy lights, and construct a simple archway from fallen birch branches. What had begun as a painful family rejection evolved into the creation of a chosen family bound not by obligation, but by genuine care. Perhaps most meaningful was the afternoon Alyssa organized a chosen family wedding shower. Walking into her decorated apartment to find 20 people who truly supported us, friends, clients, turned friends, Jason's family, Aunt Vivian, and Megan, I finally understood what real celebration felt like. No social obligations, no status maintenance, just authentic joy for our happiness. Speech someone called after gifts had been opened. Standing before this mismatched, perfect gathering, I found myself unexpectedly composed. When we first envisioned our wedding, we focused on what we didn't want: the obligation, the performance, the pressure. But this journey, painful as it's been, has clarified what we do want: authenticity, joy, and community built on acceptance rather than expectation. Thank you for being that community. As I spoke, I realized I was describing not just our wedding vision, but my vision for life moving forward. The breaking of family ties had forced me to examine which connections truly nourished me and which merely constrained. The result was painful but clarifying, like setting a broken bone so it could heal properly, instead of maintaining a comfortable but ultimately damaging misalignment. By the time our wedding week arrived, I had reached a state of unexpected peace. My parents remained estranged, and while their absence still hurt, it no longer defined my experience. I had done the necessary grief work in therapy, acknowledging the loss of what I'd hoped our relationship could be while accepting what it actually was. What I couldn't possibly have prepared for was what happened the morning of our wedding day, when my phone rang with my mother's name on the caller ID for the first time in almost 3 months. Dawn broke clear and perfect on our wedding day. I woke in Aunt Vivian's guest room sunlight, filtering through lace curtains that had hung there since my childhood visits. For a moment, I simply breathed in the peace of the moment, the distant bird songs, the subtle scent of the garden roses, the knowledge that in a few hours I would marry Jason, surrounded by people who genuinely celebrated our love. I had just finished my first cup of coffee when my phone vibrated on the kitchen counter. My mother's name illuminated the screen. My hand trembled slightly as I answered. "Rebecca," she said, her voice unnervingly normal, as though the past 3 months of silence hadn't occurred. "Your father and I would like to talk before the ceremony. We're on our way to Vivian's." Before I could formulate a response, she had disconnected. I stood frozen coffee cup, suspended midair, mind racing. Aunt Vivian entered the kitchen, immediately sensing my distress. "Eleanor called," I managed. "They're coming here. Now." Vivian's expression shifted from surprise to determination. "Well, this should be interesting. How do you want to handle it?" "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me hoped they'd come around, but today, without warning, it feels like another manipulation. "Probably is," Vivian agreed bluntly. "The question is, what boundaries do you want to maintain?" I considered this as I texted Jason, who was getting ready at his apartment. His response was immediate. "Want me to come now instead of later?" "No," I decided, both to Jason and Vivian. "I need to handle this myself. But I'd like you nearby," I added to my aunt. 37 minutes later, my parents' black Mercedes pulled into Vivian's driveway. I watched from the kitchen window as they emerged, impeccably dressed as always. Mother in a pale blue dress that I recognized as new, not the outfit she would have chosen for her daughter's wedding. Father in a business casual ensemble rather than the formal attire wedding protocol would dictate. Their symbolic message was clear: they were not here as wedding participants. I met them at the front door, Aunt Vivian hovering supportively in the background. "Rebecca," my father nodded formally. "You look well." "Thank you," I replied, the politeness reflexive despite everything. "This is unexpected." "May we come in?" my mother asked, glancing past me toward Vivian with barely disguised displeasure. I led them to the living room, where wedding preparations were already evident, my simple white dress hanging from the bookcase, floral arrangements, awaiting placement in the garden, handwritten vows on the coffee table. Mother's eyes catalogued everything, lips tightening almost imperceptibly. "I see you've proceeded with your alternative plans." "Yes," I confirmed. "The wedding is happening at 4, just as we wanted it." Father cleared his throat. "That's what we've come to discuss." For one breathtaking moment, I allowed myself to hope. Perhaps they'd had a genuine change of heart. Perhaps they were here to apologize, to support us after all. "We're prepared to put this unpleasantness behind us," he continued, dashing my momentary optimism. "We've reserved the Bristol Gardens for next Saturday. Small gathering, 100 guests maximum. We can send out announcements explaining today's event was a private commitment ceremony before the actual wedding." I stared at them, momentarily speechless. Even now, even after everything, they still didn't understand or refused to accept that this was never about the venue or guest count. "That won't be necessary," I finally replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "Today is our wedding. Our only wedding." Rebecca, my mother, sighed with practiced patience. "Be reasonable, this." She gestured dismissively. "At the preparations around us isn't a proper Mitchell family wedding." "You're right," I agreed. "It's a Rebecca and Jason wedding. And that's exactly what we want." Father's expression hardened. "We've made a very generous offer despite your behavior these past months. Either accept it and we move forward as a family, or continue with this inappropriate plan and accept the consequences." "Inappropriate," Vivian interjected, unable to remain silent any longer. "Thomas, they're getting married in a garden, not performing a ritual sacrifice. The only inappropriate thing is you giving your adult daughter an ultimatum on her wedding day." "Stay out of this, Vivian," my mother snapped. "You've interfered enough." "She's not interfering," I corrected. "She's supporting. There's a difference." The conversation devolved from there, circling the same points that had divided us for months. They couldn't understand why I wouldn't accept their compromise, which wasn't a compromise at all, but complete capitulation. I couldn't make them see that this was about autonomy, not rebellion. As their frustration mounted, the true subtext emerged more clearly than ever before. "What will people think?" Mother demanded. "The Mitchell name means something in this community." "I'm not rejecting the Mitchell name," I explained for what felt like the 100th time. "I'm just not letting it define every choice I make." "That's exactly the problem," Father declared. You've always put your individual desires above family responsibility. In that moment, with startling clarity, I understood the fundamental disconnect that had brought us to this point. In their worldview, family identity superseded individual identity, the collective reputation outweighed personal authenticity. It wasn't that they didn't love me. They simply couldn't comprehend prioritizing personal happiness over family expectations. I think we're at an impasse, I said finally, a strange calm settling over me. I love you both, and I would be happy to have you at our wedding today, the wedding Jason and I have planned. But I won't cancel it for a different event that doesn't represent us. Mother's eyes welled with genuine tears, the first real emotion I'd seen from her in months. If you do this, Rebecca, if you choose this path, then I'll be happy, I completed gently. Isn't that what you want for me, happiness? We want what's best for you, Father insisted. This is what's best for me, I replied. Jason is what's best for me. This wedding, these choices, they're what's best for me. The standoff might have continued indefinitely if Aunt Vivian hadn't stepped forward. Eleanor Thomas, she said with unexpected gentleness, I've watched this family pattern play out for 30 years. It cost me my relationship with our parents. It cost you your relationship with the man you loved before Thomas. Mother flinched visibly. That's entirely different. Is it, Vivian challenged? You gave up your own happiness to meet expectations. Now you're demanding Rebecca do the same. Break the cycle, Ellie. For once choose love over appearances. For a moment, one shining, hopeful moment, I thought my mother might soften. Something flickered across her face, something vulnerable and real. But then Father placed his hand on her shoulder, and the familiar mask settled back into place. If you won't reconsider, he said with cold finality, then I'm afraid we can't be part of this event. Come, Eleanor. My mother hesitated briefly, her eyes meeting mine in a moment of unspoken communication. Then she turned and followed him, her shoulders rigid with what I now recognized as not just disappointment, but deep, unresolved grief of her own. The front door closed behind them with a quiet click that somehow hurt more than a slam would have. I sank onto Vivian's sofa, unexpectedly calm. Are you okay? She asked, sitting beside me. Yes, I realized, surprised by the truth of it. I am. The wedding proceeded exactly as Jason and I had envisioned. Aunt Vivian's garden, transformed by friends' collective efforts, created a setting more magical than any expensive venue could have provided. The archway of birch branches and wildflowers. The mismatched vintage chairs gathered from friends' collections. The simple catered meal served family style at long tables under string lights. Aunt Vivian walked me down the aisle, both of us barefoot on the grass path. Jason waited beneath the archway, his expression of pure joy worth every difficult moment that had preceded this one. Our vows, written from the heart rather than selected from tradition, spoke of building a relationship based on authentic partnership rather than external expectations. I choose you, I told Jason before our intimate gathering, not because anyone else approves, but because you see me, truly see me, and love me exactly as I am. The celebration that followed felt liberated from the weight of performance. People danced freely, laughed, genuinely connected authentically. A surprise video montage included messages from friends who couldn't attend in person, their words of support, bringing fresh tears to my eyes. As sunset painted the garden in golden light, an unexpected figure appeared at the edge of the property. My brother Andrew stood alone, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. Jason noticed him first, touching my arm gently. Don't feel obligated, he whispered. I approached Andrew, cautiously meeting him by the garden gate. Up close, he looked exhausted, his usual perfect appearance slightly rumpled. I wasn't going to come, he admitted. But Sarah and I had a huge fight after Mom and Dad returned from their failed intervention this morning. She said I should be here supporting you, not them. She was right. Sarah said that I asked, genuinely surprised given her previous alignment with my parents. She's pregnant, Andrew revealed. Finding out we're having a baby, it's made her think differently about family, about what really matters. He shifted uncomfortably. I owe you an apology, Becca. A real one. The childhood nickname, unused for years, broke something open between us. For the next 10 minutes, we had the most honest conversation of our adult lives. He acknowledged his role as the good child had its own constraints. I admitted my resentment of his seemingly effortless ability to meet our parents' expectations. I don't know how to fix this, he concluded, but I want to try. I introduced him to Jason's parents, who welcomed him with characteristic warmth. He stayed for cake awkwardly, but sincerely congratulating us before leaving early. It wasn't full reconciliation, but it was a beginning, a crack in the facade of family dynamics that had seemed impenetrable. As Jason and I shared our first dance under the stars in Aunt Vivian's garden, I realized that what had begun as the most painful rejection of my life had transformed into something unexpectedly beautiful liberation. In losing what I thought I needed parental approval, I had gained what I truly required, the courage to live authentically. Our wedding day, despite its complicated emotional landscape, became not a source of regret, but one of profound gratitude. We had created exactly the celebration we wanted, intimate, meaningful, and genuinely reflective of our relationship. The empty chairs where my parents should have sat represented not just loss, but also the price of authentic choice, a price that in the end was worth paying. 6 months after our garden wedding, Jason and I settled into a new normal. Our apartment walls featured framed photos from our celebration, candid shots, capturing genuine joy, connection, and love. My favorite was an image Alyssa had taken Jason and I under the birch archway, forehead to forehead, laughing at a private joke during our vows. No posed perfection, just authentic happiness. My photography business had not just recovered, but evolved. The public family drama had inadvertently become a strange sort of marketing, attracting clients who valued authenticity over formality. I specialized now in documentary-style wedding photography for couples who, like us, wanted their celebrations to reflect their genuine selves rather than societal expectations. Your photos capture what weddings actually feel like, not just how they look, a recent bride commented, unwittingly describing exactly the approach I'd developed since our own experience. The family landscape remained complicated, but with promising developments. Against all expectations, my relationship with Andrew had strengthened. The impending arrival of his first child, my niece, had sparked profound reassessment of family patterns he once defended. "I don't want her growing up feeling she has to earn approval," he confessed during a coffee meeting that had become our monthly ritual. "Sarah and I have been talking about it a lot. About doing things differently than mom and dad." My parents and I maintained limited, carefully managed contact. After the wedding day confrontation, they had maintained radio silence for 6 weeks, then reached out with a predictably surface-level invitation to their annual holiday party. No apologies, no acknowledgement of the wedding, just an attempt to paper over the chasm between us. Dr. Larson, my now monthly therapist, helped me navigate these interactions with newly established boundaries. I accepted some invitations and declined others, always maintaining clear parameters about acceptable behavior. When Mother made passive-aggressive comments about alternative lifestyles during Thanksgiving dinner, I calmly gathered my belongings and left, rather than engaging in the familiar pattern of emotional manipulation. "You've learned the most powerful boundary tool," Dr. Larson noted during our session the following week. "The willingness to walk away rather than participate in toxicity." The holidays proved particularly challenging as we navigated new traditions. Jason and I spent Christmas morning with his warmly chaotic family, then Christmas afternoon with Aunt Vivian and Megan, and finally made a brief appearance at my parents' formal evening gathering. The contrast between these celebrations highlighted exactly the values that had caused our original rift. "Your parents' house is beautiful," Jason observed as we drove home that night, "but it feels like a magazine spread, not a home." It always has, I realized. I just never had anything to compare it to before. My relationship with Jason had emerged stronger from the wedding crucible. Having weathered such intense family pressure before marriage, we'd developed communication tools and boundary-setting practices that many couples don't discover until years into their relationships. We talked openly about future children and what family would mean for us, the traditions we wanted to preserve, the patterns we were determined to break. "I want our kids to know their achievements matter more than how they look achieving them," I told him one evening. "That's the opposite of how I was raised. And I want them to know that family supports each other unconditionally," Jason added. "That love isn't withdrawn when you make choices someone else wouldn't make." Aunt Vivian remained my emotional anchor throughout this period of adjustment. Our weekly garden sessions, she teaching me about her plants, I photographing the changing seasons, became sacred time for reflection and guidance. "You know what the irony is," she observed one spring afternoon as we planted tomato seedlings. "Eleanor and Thomas genuinely believe they were doing what was best for you. In their minds, maintaining social position and family image was protecting your future." "That's the saddest part," I agreed. "They can't see how their protection became control." Some relationships never fully heal, Vivian acknowledged, her hands gently patting soil around a fragile plant. But they can reach a new equilibrium. I never reconciled with my parents before they died, but Eleanor and I found a way to be sisters again, even if it's not the relationship I once hoped for. How did you make peace with that? I asked. By accepting that people can only give what they're capable of giving, she replied. Your parents may never be able to offer the unconditional acceptance you deserve. That's their limitation, not yours. The question becomes, can you love them within the boundaries of what's healthy for you? This wisdom became my guiding principle as I navigated the new family dynamic. I could love my parents without expecting them to change. I could maintain connection without sacrificing authenticity. I could acknowledge the pain they'd caused, while also recognizing the generational patterns they themselves had inherited. Perhaps the most unexpected development came during a rare lunch with my mother 3 months after the wedding. Between carefully neutral topics, she suddenly asked, "Are you happy, Rebecca?" Truly. The question, so simple yet so profound, caught me off guard. For a moment, I glimpsed the mother behind the social mask, a woman who, despite her flaws, did care about her daughter's happiness even if she couldn't understand what created it. Yes, I answered honestly. I really am. She nodded, something complicated passing across her expression. Your father and I may not understand your choices, but... She hesitated, venturing into uncharted emotional territory. We're trying to accept them. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a full acknowledgement of the harm done. But from my mother, it represented a seismic shift, the first crack in a lifetime of rigid expectations. As our first wedding anniversary approached, Jason and I planned a small gathering in our apartment to celebrate with our chosen family. Preparing for the event, I came across the group text message that had started everything preserved in my phone as a reminder of how far we'd come. We think it's best you step away for now. What had been intended as rejection had instead become liberation. In stepping away from toxic patterns, I had stepped into authentic selfhood. In losing conditional approval, I had gained genuine support. The family I had now, some biological, some chosen, was bound by love and acceptance, rather than obligation and appearance. Standing in our apartment, surrounded by evidence of the life Jason and I were building together, I realized that the wedding drama had given me an unexpected gift, the courage to define happiness on my own terms. The journey had been painful, the losses real, but the freedom discovered was immeasurable. So here's my question for you. Have you ever had to choose between pleasing others and being true to yourself? What boundaries have you set to protect your authentic life? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear it. Remember that creating a life that truly reflects your values is always worth the struggle, even when it means disappointing people you love. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and may you find the courage to write your own authentic story.